she was for quite a few years the leading lady in the national LTM pantomime, which is probably where I did come closest to working with her. And part of the reason that she's here with us in particular today is that she played Miss Aggie in what was, as far as I know, the last production of Old Storytime in Jamaica, which was in 2012.
Thank you.
welcome, Dorothy
here.
Cunningham. Also, also in that production, we can see a little bit more of your face if you tilt your camera a bit. Also in that production, playing the role of Lois, was Patria-Kaye, who I know as Aaron, who is Mrs. Charles, and who quite happily said she's not into big introductions. So really and truly, I mean, I know Patria as an entrepreneur otherwise, and she's doing different things that I have not kept up with. But she's here because of her role in that production directed by Eugene in 2012. And finally, on my list of distinguished people to introduce is Lauriston Watson, who of the people I've introduced, I know best. And the litany of his theater experience would take us till next week or next year. He too has been working in theater for, Larry, 50 years, more than 50 years.
Yeah, leave it at that.
Stage manager extraordinaire, set designer, set builder, we all know where we are laughing. And I also had the pleasure of working with him when I did the LTM National Pantomime, which he stage managed for many years. But he was perhaps in perhaps his earliest days, worked on the original production of Old Storytime in Jamaica. And that is part of why I thought it was important for him to be here. And he traveled with the production as well. So we'll hear some of those stories from Larry Watson, again, someone very well known on the Jamaican scene, has also worked on film in Jamaica. Those are my introductions. And now, Travis.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Carolyn. Yeah. Right, good. Okay, so we're going to dive straight into it. You know, one thing that always struck me about Old Storytime, the first time I read that, studied it, was the role of the storyteller. And I thought that there's no other person that is more, let's say, qualified to use that word generally, but by way of experience and interpretation, insight, theory, to speak on that aspect of the work than Professor Morris himself. We know that Professor Morris has always demonstrated a deep interest in the folk culture of the Caribbean, folk culture of Jamaica, the language, etc. And because of this, I thought that Mr. Morris would share with us some insights. So welcome, Professor Morris. Again, can you please speak?
Yes, okay. Thank you, Travis. I'm not going to talk much about folk culture. I'm going to talk much more about the way the storyteller functions in this play. Of course, it is established right at the beginning that he's connected with the folk culture. The play begins with a quiet lyrical folk song, and very soon we see the glow of Pa Ben's lantern. And over the folk song, Pa Ben sings Old Storytime, Old Storytime. So, and there's a lot of time at the beginning of the play established in establishing that Pa Ben is a storyteller, and that he's a storyteller for various audiences. The initial audience, or the primary audience, would be the actors who have various roles, but in relation to when he goes in his most storytelling mode at the beginning and at a couple of points in the play, are simply folk people. But the larger audience that he wants to connect with is the audience that's sitting in a comfortable theater. And he makes jokes about that, as you know, at the beginning. Okay? he talks about his father having been a storyteller, and his father was the chief storyteller when him feel the mood. And the mood, of course, was enhanced by white rum. And in the opening scene, Pa Ben talks about the people who have come to see the play, those who have sitting in, make your comfortable make yourself comfortable in them nice chairs. So really what Rhone, I think, is doing at the beginning is trying to establish that he wants to tell the story, or Pa Ben will tell the story for everybody. And a key element in Pa Ben is a remarkable flexibility, especially with time. Especially with time. He invites us to remember the times, old time days, good times and bad times, no opportunity for Black people. But I did live in a certain big yard, he says, next door to some of the people who the story concerned. So you see, I have first-hand knowledge. What I don't know as a fact, I will make up as I go along. So in a sense, he's presenting himself as a not entirely reliable narrator, but as a folk tale teller, somebody who will entertain us and tell us things that we want to learn about. Rhone has said that the play was originally drafted without a storyteller, and that only when he had hit upon the storytelling form did he solve the problem of how to present the whole 40-year span. The playwright Rhone pretends that Pa Ben, the main storyteller, is in control, determining emphases, omissions, the order of the information. He may allow us to see an episode played out in detail, or he may choose to move us swiftly across great tracts of time. For example, on page 12, the years went by and the boy studying books day and night, and him pass all him exams with flying colors, yet still him couldn't get a job in the bank. But later for that, one day I happened to be in a next district about 3 miles from here. So that later for that is quite a key element in the way Pa Ben presents his story. He keeps reminding us of what we don't know yet and telling us that maybe we will find out. He can make us feel several years passing in just a single sentence. Mr. Master Lenny, never tarry too long. Never tarry too long on the dark continent, that's Africa, which he visited. 2 tours was back in England. So that's a few years covered in just a simple sentence. And sometimes he's, of course, commenting on the action, like at the beginning of Act 2, when he comments on Len being bullied, when they start strut around like peacock, like the fat slobs, those dress up in the Sunday best, Sunday go to church, Sunday go out, go to meeting, biggity and arrogant. Similarly, during the enactment of George's housing scheme racket, Pa Ben makes frequent comment like damn lie and greed married to ignorance. But the interrelation between story and storyteller is not always as simple as that. The storyteller controls the order in which the information comes. the end of Act 1, we see after George looking for financial help, has been talking with Len, and Len has exposed George's brown skin contempt for black boys who attended his prestigious school. And Len has finally identified himself as one of them. Len is happy to see George's embarrassment, and closing the door after George has left, Len cannot contain himself laughing and says of George, "Son of a bitch." But as Act 2 opens, Pa Ben remarks, "What a way did sweet him." But you hear what them say? "What sweet nanny goat?" And then his audience, the actors, villagers, completely remark, "I go run in belly." So he's constantly trying to suggest that we don't know enough. Okay? Ben keeps signaling that there is information not yet revealed. After we have seen that George and Lois know each other, we are made to wait quite a while before we get the details. And Pa Ben reminds us he does not know for certain whether Miss Aggie has set Obia on Lois. The one question I wanted to ask Miss Aggie, I couldn't ask, but I had the feeling I would find out soon enough. So the storyteller, apart from suggesting that he's part of the rural context, the storyteller is very much telling us that things are going to be revealed which are not revealed yet. Now, Aggie and George are also storytellers in a sense. Miss Aggie tells how George persuaded her to pay down on her house. George tells how he blackmailed Lois at the bank and humiliated Len at school. But each of these stories is enacted, and the storyteller disappears into the enactment. I'm going to have to pause. My battery is going down. Can you put something else on?
Yeah, Professor, yeah, thanks. Yes, okay. While we wait for you to reconnect, I recognize another road named Camilla Road. I suspect there must be a connection, so very special welcome to you. Hi. Would you like to just introduce yourself, please?
Well, my name is there. What other introduction you want me to give you?
Oh, your connection, the Rhone connection.
I think he does not know.
But that one, eh?
Yes,
that
he does not know.
Okay, Camilla Rhone, my name. My rationale for being wife of Trevor Rhone. Of course, I couldn't see anything here pass without trying to become a part of it and see if you can ask many questions of what I might remember of the pain of giving birth to Old Storytime, because yes, I was very much there.
Pardon my ignorance. Definitely, I want to give you some time, and we want to hear that story. So,
I'll be happy to do. And I want to point out that my son, who bears the name Trevor, is also there. Hi, sweetheart.
We saw him earlier, yes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, so we're listening. I mean, he would not have been old enough to remember everything, but he certainly was dragged to shows and certainly heard and saw and knew and lived a lot of what happened.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks a million. We're coming back to you. We want to give you time.
Not a problem at all. Let me turn off my mic so that Mervyn, how you doing? So that,
Hi, fine, Camilla. How are you?
Not bad. So that Mervyn can continue.
Miss Cam, yes. Hello.
Who's talking to me?
Larry.
Hi, Larry. Good to see you. My goodness, all these wonderful people who I haven't seen over many years. Yeah.
Great.
I'm not
There's low
distracting you.
network
Let us
bandwidth. I don't know
proceed
what that
with
means.
the business at hand. Okay?
Nice.
Mervyn
Okay,
gone. Mervyn
Professor Morris,
disappear on
yeah.
me.
Are you connected now?
He was back and then he lost his camera.
Yes, he kind of disappeared into the boondocks.
While we were waiting for Mervyn, who I hope will reappear very soon, I would just like to recognize that we are actually on the 50th, literally on the 50th anniversary, as in the very first production in the Bahamas was the 20, the same dates we are at now. Today is the 28th, so?
Yes, no,
Yeah,
was that
26th to
yesterday? Yes.
28th. Yeah,
Yes,
this
yes.
this same 3 dates, 28, 27, 26 were the dates 45 years ago that Old Storytime was first staged in the Bahamas. Of course, I was not there either.
Time flies. I can tell you one story about that Bahamian trip. While we wait, I actually took out my sewing machine and designed and sewed a suit for Trevor to go to that, the opening of that performance.
Wow.
I remember that. And then that night, I ended up in hospital and gave birth to the first of my children. So that, you see, that also is another part of the story. Yeah, that's another part of the story.
Definitely, yeah. The birth of Old Storytime.
The birth of Old Storytime. I tell you, listen to me. It was more than 9 months in the making.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll talk about that. Not now. Yeah.
All right. I think Professor Morris is back.
Yeah.
Yes. That has been so interesting so far, listening to Mervyn's discussion of that storyteller. I think for me, that's one of the most intriguing aspects of the play, the device slash character of the storyteller, because he's both a device and a character in the play. And it's it's very skillful the way in which Rhone as playwright wrote him in as both a device and a character. And as Mervyn was pointing out, we could see he had several functions. He was kind of foreshadowing to some extent, although not revealing too much. But as Mervyn said, by letting us know that there is information we don't have, then it creates a degree of suspense and it foreshadows for us intrigue that is going to happen, that is going to come out of the whole plot. And that is really interesting then, and also the way in which the storyteller, as Mervyn said, was commenting on intervening and commenting within the dialogue of the other characters. That is also interesting. And it reminds me so much of the folk culture, how that happens and so on. Because in a sense, he is a kind of a moral voice as well. That he has that function. So yeah, storyteller in Old Storytime. I don't think that I've seen, well, at least in terms of publications of published plays in the Caribbean, any playwright that has handled the storyteller, the character of the storyteller as a character and device, the way in which Rhone has. I can't pinpoint any play where it has been done as skillfully and as colorfully as Rhone has done it. But I think that is certainly one of the reasons why we are identifying Old Storytime as a theater classic, because bringing in that traditional storyteller, that storytelling tradition, that character into the Caribbean theater, modern Caribbean theater, was really, for me, avant-garde at that time. But well, in terms of, you know, and I say modern because in terms of actually scripting the whole thing, we always had a traditional storyteller. But then scripting it, and as Mervyn was saying, that the storyteller was speaking to the immediate audience in the theater. So scripting it as a theater piece in a modern setting was really well done.
I spoke with Mervyn. He's on, although we're not seeing him on camera. So you could check if he's ready to continue.
Yes. All right, Professor Mervyn Morris, can you continue, please? You're muted, so we're not hearing you. The mic is muted.
Bulldog.
All right. I'm unmuted again.
Right, great. Wonderful. Nice. I was kind of summarizing your contribution so far. So please proceed. Yes. Thanks.
Well, I think you've done it for me. The point is that the main thing, I think, is that Pa-Ben is a remarkably flexible character and storyteller. He moves in and out of the story, and he goes across big swaths of time easily. But he also introduces at various stages people who tell the story for him or for us. And he does it very, very specifically. When Kamala said that it took some, 9 months writing it, I can see how careful the structure is of Old Story Time. If you look at the enactments, for example, each of them is carefully introduced. How did this Mr. Mac encourage you? Says Len to Mama. And then there's enactment. And Lois to Len, George has something to tell you. And then Len to George, okay, when my mother comes, you will tell her how you took her for a ride. Tell her what happened that night, George, and the events leading up to it. Leave nothing out. So that there are many. You're hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Okay, but
yes, we're hearing you.
I'm thinking a meeting alert. Start my video. Where's the video?
Oh, yeah, we're not seeing you. Your camera is not on. Just beside the microphone, there should be a video camera icon. If it has a red slash through it, then it's off. If you click it, it should come on.
It hasn't come on. Let me just finish now and try and see if I can sort that out some other. Start my video. This is. It has done that. I clicked on something that seemed to have shown my face again.
We are hearing you very well. We're not seeing you, but that's fine.
That's not only fine, that's
continue. Better. Yeah, we're hearing you.
Yes.
Mervyn, please go ahead.
Right at the end of the play, with the Cassava Nova episode at the end of the play, this is an extremely carefully delayed information by Rhone, where he keeps frequently within the play. We keep knowing that there's more pieces of that story missing, there's more to hear, and eventually we get what is a kind of emotional climax to the malice, the basis for the malice that Len has been carrying. And that scene is particularly strong in all the productions that I happen to have sat through or been to, in that the scream that comes before Len arrives with you know, his trousers down his ankles and so on, is a harrowing stream which seems to speak well beyond old story time through the whole history of oppression of blacks in various ways. I think I'll stop there. That's more than enough.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Morris. All right. Well, of course, I've summarized already, so I'm going to summarize again. But so one other,
Wow.
unless Carolyn, would you like to add anything to Mervyn's?
No, not at the moment.
All right, great, thanks. Yeah, all right. Now, when thinking about old story time and this program, I also thought about the fact that it is a piece of West Indian theater. It is Caribbean theater. Not just because of the language, but because of the storytelling form and character. But there's a lot more other than that, I think, that makes it Caribbean. And I wondered about a director because, you know, the way it's structured, could be challenging for a director, the set, the props, etc. And I know that Mr. Williams has directed the play and has met that challenge. And so for me, it's really great to have someone speak from the experience, of thinking through that and actually mounting a production of the play. So I'm really, really pleased to have Mr. Eugene Williams share with us a director's perspective on old story time in terms of it as a Caribbean play. Welcome, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Travis. Let me first of all apologize for a dental hindrance, which I can't really do anything about. I hope it doesn't interfere with the clarity of what I'm going to say. I'm going to present at the risk of sounding, I hope it don't sound too academic, in an effort to talk about Caribbean aesthetic, or Caribbean theater aesthetic that Travis has given me as an assignment. So here goes. I've been asked to speak on the topic of a Caribbean theater aesthetic, a director's perspective of Trevor Rhone's Old Story Time. I interpret this charge as a dual one that should speak to a Caribbean aesthetic of dramaturgy as represented in the play, and a Caribbean aesthetic of performance, which could be part of a director's vision for a production of the play. Now, memory only allows me to focus on the former with a limited recall of the production that I directed over a decade or more ago. As those people who know me or have been in touch with me recently, my memory is not too good. So I will try to deal with the two aspects of this Caribbean aesthetic issue that Travis asked me to do. In October 2012, I directed Old Story Time, first as part of a celebration of Jamaica's 50th anniversary of political independence. Secondly, as a fulfillment of a promise that I had made to Trevor Rhone about a year before his passing, when we discussed the setting up of a repertory company for performing his plays. And thirdly, as an educational aid for students preparing for CSEC English B literature, which was the primary focus of the production and the producer. As a director and teacher of drama, I came of age in the creative combustion of the era of post-colonial Caribbean drama of the 70s and 80s, in which models of a Caribbean theater, dramaturgy, and performance were emerging. I am therefore acutely aware of Rhone's contribution through his plays to this aesthetic movement. I think of post-colonial drama as plays that write back to colonial issues of identity and power structures of race, class, and gender, with liberatory strategies of language, dramaturgy, performance, space, place, etc. In the offerings of a post-colonial aesthetic of Caribbean drama that our major playwrights have provided, I would suggest that they indicate a trajectory of at least 3 models drawn from popular traditional cultural forms of dramaturgy and performance. In the first, there are plays in which elements of these cultural forms are employed through the language, events, and world of the characters. Most of our plays fit in this category. In the second, a particular cultural form is significant to the story and its performance, but not necessarily to its structure. Man Better Man by Errol Hill and Nine Night, which was recently in production, a production that came from the UK by Natasha Gordon, are 2 examples. In the third category, a particular cultural form serves as a generative agent of the dramaturgy of the play. In this category, I would put Dennis Scott's An Echo in the Bone, Trevor Rhone's Old Story Time, Derek Walcott's Tijon, Roald Gibbons' Shepherd, and Stafford Ashani's Masqueraders. There are, of course, others. In a number of Rhone's plays, storytelling is used liberally as exposition and argument. In his Toucan play, we are treated to the storytelling skills of Jim, sometimes in an entire scene. In Rhone's Bella's Gate Boy, which I had the honor of directing Rhone himself as the lone actor, this was a minimalist production which he performed on tours abroad out of a single suitcase. His scribal art of storytelling shines through. So I want to talk about his Trevor as a storyteller as well. In fact, in a short reflection to celebrate his work and memory, I wrote the following. I certainly endorse the many tributes and accolades that he has been credited with as a playwright, but I don't think much has been said about his power as a storyteller. To be a good writer for stage or screen, you have to have a good story to tell or to show. And Trevor had that special knack for recognizing and telling a good story. Our meetings at my office or at his home would begin with him telling me the story of a new play script or a film script that he wanted me to read. Needless to say, I was always totally engaged with his perceptiveness and sensitivity to the complexities of human behavior, human drives that propel characters, and the intricacies of human relationships. In addition, his sense of humor, his abiding respect for and belief in the Caribbean folk intelligence, as well as his grasp of the communicative power and range of the Jamaican Creole, would all emerge in his writing with an authenticity and effortlessness of a fine griot. So he was a particularly good storyteller himself and used the form effectively across some of his work. But in All Story Time, I think he arrived at the exemplary achievement of employing the traditional storyteller and traditional storytelling as generative devices of the play's structure. Its particular orature, source, texture, and imagery are all rooted in the Africanist folk sensibility of his characters and spectators across the region, and indeed across Jamaica and across the diaspora, located as a pivotal intermediary alongside the community, equally anguished, conflicted, and involved in the enactment of the tale, is Pa Ben in Old Story Time. He's the guardian of the threshold of moments of crisis and the voice of wisdom. To show more directly how the traditional form of storytelling generates the dramaturgy and structure in specific aesthetic ways, I will use some of Richard Bauman's aesthetic keys of traditional storytelling performance as a model. The first key is framing. Rhone frames the drama with the storyteller and storytelling as the overarching aesthetic motif and performance principle of the interactivity of the teller and the internal community, who will be the performers, and the teller and the external community, who is the theater audience. This sets up the style of the performance: narration with role play and non-naturalism with the missing fourth wall. And this also signals the genre of folk drama of the play. Another aesthetic key is the use of a special cultural formula, which in this case, the case of Old Story Time, opens and closes the performance. This special cultural formula we know in storytelling across the Caribbean. In Guyana, where I'm originally from, a storyteller would start by saying, "Nancy," and the audience would respond, "Story." In parts of the Caribbean, that marker can be crick, crack. Here, just interact, teller and the audience, etc. In Old Story Time, it is Old Story Time, marking the beginning of storytelling. And if I'm not mistaken, the internal audience would repeat it. That formula is done in a call and answer format, which is another key that unlocks or introduces the form, signaling the use of direct audience performer interaction. Another key I would mention here is the coinage of special words or phrases, indicative of communicative competence of the teller, which also infuses humor. A very good example in Old Story Time is when Pa Ben says, "When the perpendicular meet the contuberance, which inlay the combruction," and there are others. Now, despite the obvious fact that it is invented on the spot by Pa Ben, there is no doubt about its meaning. The weighty collision of linguistic plosives and fricatives elevates the gravity of the ultimate threshold of the drama at which that uttering comes. Then another key is the appeal to tradition, a way of signaling the assumption of responsibility for the proper doing of the communicative act. Pa Ben signals that the story was told to him by his father, and Mervyn referred to that. And he goes on to speak of his father as an authoritative and endearing character. So this too is a key that is critical to the structure and the indication of what is this form we are doing and we are participating in. And Rhone transfers these forms from the traditional storytelling form to the play. Underlying all of these keys is the in Old Story Time, this is marked particularly by the strong belief in an active spirit world that permeates the play and performance through utterances, folk songs, and Africanist rituals of protection and ruination. This aesthetic progression is vivified in the performance of the play's climax through a revivalist circle of prayerful exhortation enacted for Miss Aggie's deliverance from a trajectory of negativity and to the restoration of communal unity. The storyteller finally closes the frame in his characteristic summation. Here he uses again a special and well-known greeting in Jamaica. "Ah, well," as he did with the Old Story Time in the beginning, signaling that the order has been restored and the tale has ended. Now, clearly a production of this play that seeks to honor its dramaturgical features should arrive at strategies for keeping the performance as well, for keying the performance as well. Now, in my 2012 production, a number of my production choices were influenced by the aforementioned obligations of the text. Among the critical production choices was the casting of the play. The casting of the storyteller, for all the reasons I've already discussed, was crucial to the success of the production. I already had the benefit of seeing Rhone's very successful production, in which we saw Charles Hyatt's extremely memorable and outstanding performance. But Charles Hyatt was no longer with us. So I asked myself, what were those performance qualities that the play demanded and Charlie demonstrated? After all, his interpretation was the blueprint. I concluded that he, like Pa Ben, had a certain mischievous charm and a comedic quality that was akin to my own definition of a model for the Caribbean actor, which I call the Anansi technique. His instrument, in its use of body, gesture, and voice, was culturally tuned, particularly in his rapport with fellow actors and with an audience. Those of us who know Charlie would understand what I'm talking about. He was a delightful raconteur. I had directed him and found him to be improvisational, playful, and outstanding in his interactivity and creation of a role. My choice of actor for the role, therefore, became another master of these aesthetic qualities, Winston Bell. Winston and I were in the same cohort of students at drama school here in Jamaica. He was a devout spiritualist Christian, in the vein of the revivalist people in Jamaica, Shouter Baptists in tradition in Trinidad, and the Jordanites in Guyana, whose performative religious tradition informed his very physical and sensuously rhythmized approach to acting. His role of the protagonist in Royal Gibbons' Shepherd was a joy to behold. These same performative skills he took to the role of the shifting narrator in Daniel Scott's Dog, thereby dynamizing another Caribbean classic in a notably unique aesthetic way. Bello, as he was fondly known, was a major inspiration to my definition and exploration of the Anansi technique for the Caribbean actor. He brought a fresh, inventive, and satisfying interpretation to the role of Pa Ben, even though the ghost of Charlie's interpretation hovered in the early stages of the rehearsal. The general performance style was non-realistic. It necessitated immediate role play and role shifts. In the traditional cultural form of storytelling, role play is a feature in many stories. So the storyteller has to be proficient in role shifting across roles or across time and place. This is a requirement in Rhone's play, demanding the ability to mark and embody each role or shift with rhythmic, vocal, and physical qualities. This is a requirement, as Mervyn was mentioning, not just for Pa Ben, but some of the other characters who also help to tell the story. Stanislavski's method approach of privileging the internal work is not entirely helpful here. Again, I found that what I call in the Anansi technique, finding the tune, finding the dance, which in fact comes naturally to the culturally tuned Caribbean actor, worked effectively for most of the actors. Now I cannot recall more about the aesthetic vision of my production. So I will close with an extract from my director's note, which sort of gives a sense of what we had created. Here goes. This production of Trevor Rhone's charming folk drama is a celebration of Jamaica's 50 years of political independence. The play's iconic representation of the internalization and vicious legacy of the prejudices of race, color, and class, and the indomitable strategies of the peasantry to overcome these obstacles have resonated with poignant familiarity across the Jamaican and diasporic landscape for the last 50 years and beyond. Rhone's spinal thrust in the drama is generated through assault of the Earth Mother, Miss Aggie, as she defiantly sets out to chart a future of advancement for her son Len through higher education into the social strata of power. Len's journey is coming into liberated personhood, and the healing of the fractured circle of family and community are the stuff of the story. The play's thematic discussion and infectious entertainment values strives on the compelling cultural authenticity of its characters, as well as a series of skillful performative styles of theater that is magically maneuvered by the quintessential storyteller, who takes the audience on the journey through time, often stepping into the drama as a confidant, provocateur, and moral advisor. Rhone's classic is also a celebration of our ancestral folk culture. The use of collective storytelling devices, and more particularly the use of the traditional storyteller who seasons the drama's brew with proverbs, folk phrases, ritualized motifs, interactivity with the audience, and a general atmosphere of spirited entertainment, all of which make for a delectable cultural feast. Through Pa Ben's omnipresent wisdom and his shuffling of time and event, together with the play's pervasive employment of biblical principles as sources of fortitude and survival, playwright Trevor Rhone points to a validation of our cultural traditions and an inherent spirituality that still continues to oil and sustain the daily quests of most Jamaicans. Thank you.
Thank you. You were and are still the man for the job, Eugene. Thanks. Thank you very much. Excellent analysis. Some theory there, but well, plenty theory there. But I know that theory is grounded in practical perspectives and experience. Yeah. Thanks a million. All right. So we are going to come back to the panelists, but we want to cover everyone. And you did mention about that mother there. And so you're taking us right to Miss Dorothy Cunningham, who's going to speak to the mother in Old Story Time. Am I correct, Dorothy?
Very, very correct.
All
and
right.
Many thanks to you and to the Department of Creative and Festival Arts for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. I feel so blessed. It's a wonderful evening. In starting, I'm going to quote words.
Just before you start, Dorothy, we're seeing like, we're not seeing your full face, and we want to see all of you, but all of your face. That's it. That's better. Right. Center it. Great. Excellent. Thanks.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. In beginning, I came across these words from the poet Khalil Gibran. Out of suffering has emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. And I think that epitomizes the Caribbean woman. She has found a way to battle through, forge through, without allowing anything to stop her from achieving her objective. When I was asked by Trevor Rhone to attend a reading at the Way Out Theatre many years ago, I felt that I had arrived. Yes, my talent as an actress was being recognized by the famous T. Rhone. I went there feeling so good. And I failed miserably to impress. I realized afterwards that I was far too immature and far too inexperienced to understand the complexities of race, identity, malice, and the redeeming power of love that is portrayed in this particular play. Fast forward to 2012, when I was called by Eugene Williams to read for the role of Miss Aggie, Len's mother, I thought to myself, well, maybe now I am good enough to be a part of this production. And let me confess, I was a little nervous also because having seen the amazing work done by actresses like Serene Tomlinson, Leonie Forbes, etc., I didn't want to be a carbon copy of another actress, but I wanted whatever I did to be authentic and to stick as closely as possible to the essence of the script. And boy, oh boy, what a script. I mean, Miss Aggie is like many Caribbean women who embrace the task of raising her son alone with a determination to give him the best education and as many opportunities in life as she can possibly afford to do with her meager resources. And having been born in an era where it was commonly believed that if you're white, you're all right, and if you're black, stay back, she had to find a way to chart her way through all of that. And one way she did it was by discouraging Len from playing with the village children because anything black no good. She didn't want the blackness to rub off on Len. Instead, she was forcing him to aspire to a relationship and friendship with the lovely light-skinned Miss Margaret with her long straight hair that would chop all the way down to her back. Talk about rejection of self. And years later now, Miss Aggie was willing to turn over her life savings to another light-skinned, what Granny Williams called BCBP, better class brown people, George McFarlane from the bank, who was mixed up in some shady real estate deal. And we are in 2024. Don't we still have shady real estate deals going on somewhere? Has anything changed? Anyway, as an actress and a woman, I have to ask how Miss Aggie could consider herself and her son Len and Miss Lois inferior to a Miss Margaret and a Mr. McFarlane simply because of the shade of their skin color. But, you know, myself having lived through the 60s and into the 70s where the Black Power movement was right, and say it out loud, I'm black and I'm proud, and having had my Angela Davis hair afro puff out there, and into the 21st century now we see skin bleaching and false hair long down to your back, brushing the back of your knees. So I don't know, what's the story here? And I'm sure that Miss Aggie would probably have on her dresser a jar of Pond's cold cream. Those of us who remember that, Pond's cold cream, and a box of La India face powder.
That's and Nadinola.
No, Nadinola came later. But Pond's La India face powder was pink. And when you put it on, it was to make your skin look a bit lighter, regardless of the fact that your face and your neck is two different colors, no matter. But you're stepping out, well-dressed, looking light and bright. Then came Nadinola. Sadly, I believe that Miss Aggie failed to realize that her obsession with pushing Len into corners and areas where he did not necessarily want to go, instead of making him love her more, it actually alienated him and made him want to keep as far from her as possible and to keep her out of his life. So, you know, it's then again, we think in today's day now, we as parents, we want our children to go into areas like the profession, lawyer, doctor, Indian chief and things. And so how would you take it now when your son say, yes, I know, Mom, you have the money to pay for me to go to the university to do medicine, but I want to be a tattoo artist. I want to be an auto mechanic. The scales. The question is there. Do I support my child in what he wants to do, or do I force them into the area that I think is best? Well, what a shock for Miss Aggie now to realize that Lois has paid such a heavy price to enable Len to achieve his dreams. The same Lois, the tar baby, the old dog, is the person that enabled him to become a doctor. And he's a doctor, but as Miss Aggie would say, he can't even write a prescription. So she don't really see the value of the doctorate. Also, talking about Pa Ben and his role as the narrator, the storyteller, I found the relationship between Pa Ben and Miss Aggie very, very interesting, because it seemed to be that Pa Ben was the only person that she could really unburden herself to or talk with. And he was not afraid of pointing out to her the errors of her ways in a very firm, patient, but understanding way, because he knew what was her problem. He knew what made her tick. And on Aggie's side, she might be vexed with him and she might be upset with him, but there was no malice that she carried towards him, because after a little while, when him try and friend her up and a nice look at him, and she relented and they came back on an even keel and they talked again. I saw Miss Aggie as a typical Caribbean woman, as I said before. She's a single parent fighting against all odds. And we never really got into where was Len's father. But that's a story for another time, as Ben would say, right? Her life was for everything structured about her son, and I believe around her church, because she was a church-going woman. She had a strong belief, and I think Miss Aggie was a staunch member of the Anglican Church. And you know why I say the Anglican Church? Because that is where the better class brown people went to worship. Plus, they would have a white minister. Miss Aggie is not going to go to the Baptist church with a whole heap of black people and them black person. So that is her thing. So when this staunch woman now, who would probably participate in every church event, every rally, she did there with her money to rally, and things like that. Mind you, Anglican churches didn't do rallies, but they had fundraisers. So how is this church woman now going to try and work Obia against her son's wife? What a dilemma. Such hatred of self. I think in looking at the whole story and the structure from start to finish, the beauty of that play was that the resolution led to redemption. As Eugene said, that closing scene with them trying to turn back the boomerang that Miss Aggie had set out there for Lois, and it would catch her. In modern terms, we say karma. But they had to turn about, and that scene, I can tell you, I remember once Eugene said to me, "You're a very spiritual person. Be careful. Don't get too caught up in," because I could feel myself in that circle, almost like something was happening, and I had to hold it. What is that, Eugene?
You moved me to tears in that film.
Oh God, it moved me. It scared me, but it was a powerful scene, and the way it was directed. Also, every night when we finished that play, we were physically and emotionally drained. And I remember coming off stage. Well, the audience gave us the thumbs up. Job well done. The audience reaction said that. But when we came off stage, instead of in a normal production, it's like a chatter backstage, we just went and started to put on our yard clothes. we were still there in a zone, you know. And I just think it was a wonderful opportunity for me to work with a set of people that were so disciplined. I mean, you talk about theater discipline now and again, and I very rarely see what I consider the old time discipline, where you respect each other's space and you don't carry the road or the street into the dressing room and onto the stage with you. And I really want to thank Patria-Kaye, Bello of blessed memory, Michael Forrest, Devon, Canute, and Kenisha, because they made that production such a wonderful experience for me. And also because yes, I am older than all of them, maybe except Bello, but I learned from them as well. So it was for me a learning experience, which I've always felt if you go into something and you're not coming away with something positive, you would have wasted your time. And when I reach my age, I really don't have that much time left. So you want the time to be spent well. And they all put so much thought into developing their characters. I mean, and Eugene ruled us with a very firm hand. So there was no getting away on anybody, trying a little thing. It just wasn't on. And I think I really believe that having had the opportunity to do Old Story Time has made me as an actress feel mission accomplished, and I can't say enough about it. In closing, I want to just share with you, I came across Easton Lee. Oh God, Easton Lee is such a wonderful person. But he wrote a poem. I think most of you might know this book called Behind the Counter. And in going through it the other day, I came across a poem that I think he was talking about these Caribbean women. Well, I know he was talking about these Caribbean women. So let me just share a part with you. We learn in retrospect how we were sheltered for 9 months and emerging, cared for by hands that gently rocked our early sleep, that washed and cleaned us to the pleasant baby smell of olive oil and talcum. Those same hands that smacked your bottom, boxed your ears when you got too fresh, soothed your brow, wiped your runny nose, or the streams of tears from your dirty face, pulled and pushed or gently led us into early life and living. The same hands that ordered you to bed, to homework, house chores, dust the table, feed the fowl, wash the dishes, cut your nails, clean your shoes, wash your socks, brush your teeth, wash your hands, you nasty child, before you eat. The same hands that dismissed you. Get away from me, you two botheration. Hugged away your cares when you're afraid of the dark, or you buck your toe, or afraid of the jungle in the park. That baked the birthday cake from one egg, a little flour and sugar. Those same hands working late into the long night while you're growing up sleeping. Hands with no visible tiredness, always turning, making fashion with very little or nothing sometimes. Working with needle and thread and the old sewing machine to stitch up your life. And when you're older, you're no wiser, but you still wonder how this miracle was possible to make dinner from a breadfruit, a slice of pumpkin, and one chocho. And no matter how old you be or which place you be, you never forget your childhood slumber, cradled in her arms with the hallelujah chorus. Jesus loves the little children. So you look upon this noble hand of God's chosen, ordained to the sacred task of motherhood. The mother who had to be father, brother, uncle, and auntie, give thanks and thank the giver. For the sacrifice is a hard task, master. It keeps the eyelids open long, long nights, swell the feet with long standing, and pains the heart with longer loving. It is a wide river, a high mountain, yet there is rest at last after the tired crossing and the breathless climbing. So now to the women who bear children, and plenty who don't. But mother children, we say respect, more respect, give thanks, give thanks. Those are my final words.
Give thanks indeed. I would just like to, I mean, Miss Aggie is a most memorable mother figure, and I know that there have been a series of students reciting that speech when she beat Len, when she found him down by the river. That speech is, I think I used to know it by heart. That gone now, but Dorothy, please, I just one little point. The hair down to the back. It's not tall hair down to the back. Mervyn, it's not tall
A
hair.
nice brown girl with
Tall hair down to our back.
Oh.
It is very important that we do not say long.
Yes, it was tall. Yes.
Tall hair down to our back. Very for me, very important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Long like a
Dorothy.
rosa, mama. My pleasure.
Travis?
Yes, thank you very much, Dorothy. I can see that you lived and really felt that character.
Oh, I did.
Yes, great, and it had an impact on you. All right, nice. So we move on now to another lady who played Lois, I believe, right? Really pleased to be meeting you for the first time, Patria-Kaye. Thank you very much for agreeing to share with us. So over to you.
I'm very happy to have this conversation. And it's interesting that, when you met me, you said you look like a Lois. And I am the farthest thing from Reverend Bree's daughter, with the nice brown girl, tall hair down to her back. When I read for the role, there were so many parallels with Lois' life that I saw in myself and identified very strongly with the character. And this particular text was precious to me because it was one of two plays that I would have studied in 1998, 97 as CXC material. We would have done two plays at the time. We would have done Trevor Rhone's Old Story Time, and we would have done A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. And there was mirroring of so many themes in both those two plays, set in two different parts of the world. But there was this thread of similar themes, relatable themes that me, as a Caribbean child at the time, I could relate to it. And with the slew of literature books that were available to us that we had to do as academic work during the time, I think both those two books were the ones that most of us as students of literature we gravitated to, because we could easily see ourselves in those as opposed to Shakespeare novels that we were studying, or some of the other texts that presented themselves. You saw yourself in A Raisin in the Sun, and even more so, you saw yourself in Old Story Time in some way, shape, or form, and you saw people that you knew. And as you sit down and you consider whether or not Old Story Time of 45 years ago is applicable today, I heard Miss Dor say, what has changed? And she triggered a memory of 5-year-old me watching TVJ, hearing, Nadsy no love bleaching cream, a better look for you. And you think, what has changed? Miss Margaret is good, and George is good purely by virtue of the color of their skin. And we have a whole generation of people who right now in this here country today investing time and effort and money in bleaching products to get themselves looking like George and Miss Margaret, because they feel as if it's not just about the way that they look, but the stature that it might bring them in the society. I think there's so many themes that run through Old Story Time that audiences at whatever period relate to, Caribbean audiences relate to. It keeps coming back up on the CSEC curriculum. And it's one of those things that the literature teachers find easier to teach because the students get invested and involved in the script. I thought about that parallel between my own life, because even as we think through what Sir Williams calls the vicious legacy that is displayed in the text, I think about the fact that I would have gone to school in Edinburgh, in Scotland, and done my degree, and I'm an educated girl. But the reception of me with my nappy hair coming back as a bright girl is totally different from the reception of Alois. So even as we see the parallels in then and now, I take heart and I recognize where we have grown, how we have become better as a society, and how there are people who are not necessarily living that very same experience that Alen and Lois would have lived. I remember of the very many notes. Sir Williams is one to handwrite you a note, a director's note at the end of every performance around something to tweak or a nuance or something that he would observe or something for you to pay attention to. And one of those that he would have given to the cast on a regular basis, certainly from the beginning of we started production, he said, if man come to the show and say, show nice, you wouldn't have done your job. If all his sentiment was at the end of watching you on that stage is, show nice, you wouldn't have done your job. Because there's so many thematic presentations within Old Story Time that cause for connection in a very intimate way, that cause people to introspect, to see themselves, to feel all hurt, to... The power of the boo was very strong for me, particularly in this show, because when poor Michael touched that stage who played George, and every single child in that audience could not see him as Michael the thespian, but saw him as George, the wicked thieving scammer boy. And the boo that came from their bellies made me feel like, Michael, doing work tonight, right? There's just a beauty in the character development of Old Story Time that allows you to do that kind of work, that introspective work, whether you are reading it as a student or seeing the thespians on stage and watching a play, that the kind of craft that Sir Morris spoke about and Sir William spoke about, and how he puts these characters together and tells this story in an art form that has this, it's 45 years old, but it's fresh. And it causes you to reflect on society and where we're going and the work that we have to do and where we're coming from. Things around class, around this in the future, the hope for the next generation, workplace oppression and injustice, scamming, community connections, spirituality, all of those things and the way that they present are still very relevant in Caribbean culture today, and not just Jamaican culture. I'm deliberate about saying Caribbean culture because it's interesting when you go to other islands and you connect with other Caribbean people, and it is a similar experience and a similar reflection of what was then is very much today. That vicious legacy that Eugene talks about still plagues us today. And so I was very blessed to have been able to be a student of it in 98 and then an actress in the play in 2012. And I appreciated the opportunity to take a look at myself, my own trajectory, and to see myself in Lois and just to be thankful for our different outcomes. My mother-in-law absolutely loves and adores me, and she holds me up on this pedestal with my nappy hair and my dark skin, and I hate makeup, and that's okay because the parts of us that were able to see and read Trevor Rhone's Old Story Time and learn and grow from that, I live that, and I'm very thankful for that. So this was a beautiful experience for me.
Thank you, Patria. It's making me reflect on things that I hadn't thought of before. For reasons other than this gathering today, I've been looking back at Echoing the Bone as well, and that's turning 50 next month. And I honestly, as much time as I have spent with both plays, had not thought about certain kinds of similarities in the two of them that you're raising. Michael Forrest is with us. Welcome, Michael. It's good to have you. I didn't know you were moved. I'm happy for you. It must be rough though. I keep thinking of the people who, have to play that role. Bobby Gisses, Keith Sasso, people in our community who have that phenotype, have that heritage, and end up playing this role for the one character who is not redeemed in this script. And that might well be for our collective redemption, that he's not redeemed, he's not in that circle at the end, and we're not apologizing for it. And I think structurally about the play sometimes and wonder, how could one person be in the whole of them life individually and making mischief and doing wrongs? It's not fair to him. It really not fair to the character. but it works. Right? It works on stage. It works to help us have that catharsis. It works. Back to you, Travis.
Yeah, thanks a million. Right. We certainly want to hear from Mike a little later, because we want to hear from Camilla as well. And I know that Henry Muto has something to share with us as well. We have Ken and others. I recognize some names there. I know that we have some theater people. I'm very grateful. But we must turn now to, last but not least, the man Lauriston Watson, who I know has been, the stage manager and has traveled with the play and who has a lot to share with us. But he's going to determine his perspective, which aspect he wants to share with us. Welcome, Lauriston. Thank you very much. Your mic is muted, so we're not hearing you.
Thank you for inviting me. I will start off by reminding persons that it was a discotheque at the Way Out Theatre in the Pegasus Hotel that was conformed to a theatre space with around 22 feet in length and around 14 feet in depth for this play. And the stage was around 18 inches off the ground, which meant that the corridor down the end of the Pegasus Hotel to the back where the bathroom was partitioned off to be the dressing room on one side and the backstage door on the other side, which meant that persons like Bobby Gisses and Keith Sasso, myself, and Michael London would have difficulty traversing through the doorway on top of the stage, because the doorway was around 7 foot high with this 18-inch platform blocking it. And I recall on one occasion where Leonie has this technique of having different tie heads laid out in a particular way for her transitions, going with the present to flashback. And she was very meticulous in how she designed her tie heads and how she pre-tied them and laid them out. And one of them was ill-placed in terms of it got untangled, and she wanted it to be perfect, and she always had a second set in her dressing room, and she sent me for it, and I was behind her because I have to hold the door for her to go through after she said hold dog. And in getting her the tie head, I remember running off the stage and hitting my head on the doorway, that door jam over. And that was a remembrance. But let me start with this. The installation and the finding of the materials and the resources to help the story was my fun challenge. For example, Parbain's house was stage left, and we had to find a chair that would fit Charlie's economic backdrop. But this chair had to have a back that could hold the weight of Bobby Gisses and Keith Sasso for that scene where there were going to be this carriage rider. And that was successful because when Bobby Gisses put on weight and he climbed on that chair, we always take a breath because he was really acting out this carriage thing on that back chair back. And then there was this change the house around to the house in town scenario where we had to create these Watland panels to cover the house in town's flats, including putting up this bookshelf with these fancy books for Len and then covering it with a curtain that could be removed for that set change. Of course, for me, the full stop for the set was this Jesus, white Jesus picture, which at the back of it was Len's diploma or PhD certificate in the flip around. The purchasing of a extra large polka dot panty for that scene where Len is going to the house up in Mountain View Avenue with a flag in a yard to come back, and his straw hat, dark glasses, and how Carl Binger or Calvin Foster worked that scene. We had a challenge to pick which was the funniest scene. What would it be? I like the name from Pearl, because the audience, if we were to meter the decibels of the audience response, for I like the name from Pearl versus Anything Black No Good with Mama draping up the CEO of a cement company in short khaki pants and torn shirt as she switched him versus the Spanish accent of Carl Binger or Calvin Foster on the phone. And then when he was told to put the panty on his head, and then the knocking on the door, and then he comes to the door with the panty on his head, and then the audience goes up, and then he recalls that the panty is on his head at the very last moment as the door opens and puts the panty in his back pocket. Those scenarios, for me, are the little comic relief that Trevor does to set us up for the end. As Dorothy pointed out, for me, I'm giving Jerome Lawrence, who's on lights, that standby cue, which I didn't have to after the first 3 nights. We played over 200 odd performances. And when they tried to get this, they had this dance where they went in this tight circle and the lights came down and just had the lights on them. And then Lois looked upon Miss Aggie and says, Mama. And we went to black. And depending on how we felt the audience, we would keep that black for a little while before we brought the lights up for curtain call. And for me, the end, as the beginning with the lantern, the lit lantern in the low lit auditorium and the sharp black for Mama made that story just popped. And we had persons like Edna Manley seeing that play over 8 times and coming backstage each time. And I would like to say how Charlie was in terms of his playing with Trevor's work, because I recall one day he got a huge mango from a special person, and he didn't trust Carl Binger staying backstage with his mango. So during a particular scene, he took the mango on stage, and as it was Bobby Gizes playing George, and as Bobby came across through the auditorium for that scene where he's going to the country, for some strange reason, Charlie decided to bite the mango, and the juice went down his hand as he bit this mango. And that scenario threw Bobby badly. And for the first time, Charlie began to do a call and response scenario where he gave the synopsis of what George would say and how he would respond for that scene. And then that particular scenario took Charlie's, that technique that Charlie provided us with, to when we went to St. Croix by seaplane, and Miss Aggie, played by Serene Tomlinson, got a little bit discombobulated by this new theater space we were in, and she was a bit late for her cue to come on, and Charlie ad-libbed, and that helped create a different spice to the storytelling when we were in different spaces. And I will recall the flowers that Len juggled with in that obia scenario. I didn't know that some flowers had some poisonous aspects to it. And Charlie pointed that out to me as a young stage manager when I used to be very proud of the different flowers I would bring to give Len to do that little obia shuffle with. And that was a learning tool for me as a young stage manager. And that's my offering.
Thank you, Larry, very much. You spoke about, we have a couple pictures. I had wanted to share some visuals before, but we have so many people that we want to hear from that I would rather leave the floor for people to speak. I can share my screen and we can, go look at the slides while we are listening to other people, if you don't mind. We could do it that way.
All right,
Thanks,
Carolyn.
Larry.
Yeah,
All right,
well,
Travis.
yeah, well, that's great. I think that, I'd like to see what you prepared. So can we do this? And then I really want to hear about the birth of the story of the birth of old story time from Camilla. So, so can you go, Carolyn, share what you have with us, and then we'll go to Camilla.
I'll share my screen, but there's the kind of self-evident. It's reviews from the very first performances, first Bahamas, then Trinidad, then Jamaica, program cover as that kind of thing. So I'm quite willing to click through the slideshow while Camilla speaks, if she doesn't mind.
Not a problem at all. Not a problem.
Okay, cool.
I wanted to just throw a couple of other not knobs in the works, but just to bring some other realizations to those who may not have been close and around in that 9-month plus period before the birth. I suppose nobody wonders why the inaugural presentation, was in the Bahamas. That's the first question. And if anybody has any thoughts about why that was so. Well, normally Trevor would open a play in Jamaica, right? In Kingston. But this time he went to the Bahamas. There's a story behind that. It was part of the issue of the first play he was doing after a very successful Smile Orange. There was a little bit of, maybe I don't want to use it as insecurity, but every writer has to prove to themselves that they still have it. And not just in the same amount that they left the last time, but more. I don't know how many of you know that there were like about 3 versions of Old Story Time before it actually showed itself on the stage in the Bahamas. And those versions were dismissed with great distress. And the gestation period took another step again, until there was some level of satisfaction that perhaps this was something that he wanted to show his people, And then the nights of working through with papers all over the bed, reading. Everybody had to take a read of a part of it to see how they felt. I'm sure Mervyn was very much a part of that process. He would share the script and listen. And then when he went to the Bahamas, I got a telegram. I still have it somewhere in the house that says, standing ovation, work well done. So, he wanted to test it outside of his normal audience, and it was found to be worthy. So that's just part of the pain of the gestation. I don't know if there's anything else. I can add other stuff, but I see Carolyn has started to share the screen. So let her take over because she might have to talk about what we see. Please, Carolyn.
I was trying to avoid the talking about to a certain extent because I wanted to hear from other people. But here is the review. I would like to try slideshow, but just for security. Yeah, here is the review of a piece of the review of the Bahamian production. And in our pre-meeting conversation, Eugene mentioned that Rhone had said that the Bahamas production was his. Eugene, tell us how that story goes. The Bahamas production was the one he was most.
He said he found the Bahamas production to be true. That was his actual word. Most true. His experience. I'm interested to hear from Pamela whether the script changed between Bahamas to Trinidad and Trinidad to the Way Out Theatre in Jamaica.
I think having tried it done the work in the Bahamas, he wanted to get validation of it as a Caribbean work. And there were people happy in Trinidad to have him while he was organizing and arranging for it in Jamaica. And for him, it was in fact the validation part, I think, that he needed to press on, because he never stops writing, by the way. So while he was finished writing one and was producing it, it also gave him an impetus to continue writing another. So he needed that validation to move on.
Okay, and here is the headline from the Trinidad review of that original performance. And when I read the reviews, they actually suggest changes that will have taken place, because there are comments about the nature of Act 2, about one critic saying it was kind of long, another one saying that some threads needed to be tied, better. And it seems that we can get a kind of hint of how the script evolved when we read the reviews.
Right.
But you were telling us about a birth? Was it the birth only of the play?
Not only of the play, my daughter, my first child. She came into being at that time.
Okay.
A lot of hard work. Isn't that something? Those are my designs. I remember drawing all of that stuff. Isn't that something?
Okay. You see, now that is part of the story. When we look at the archive, we will have information like that. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. That was an interesting period. Painful. I mean, birth is never without its pain. But you go through it, you work at it, and when it happens, it's positive and you feel good about it. So while Trevor is there at the front, I'm at the back saying, nice, I can sleep well tonight.
Give thanks. These are the reviews, or few of the reviews from the opening in Jamaica. And Larry mentioned how many performances. I don't know that there has been any play that has run quite as long as Old Storytime ran that first time round from 79 to 82.
No.
Yeah.
Mervyn, you remember writing that review?
Yeah.
That was 79, 1979.
Yes.
1979, yeah.
It's amazing, eh?
Yes. Yep. Okay, next. And so, of course, it had various iterations over the years. I wouldn't have been able to capture all of them. And I should mention that this material, a lot of the material you're looking at, is from the collection that the family handed over to the library at UMona, which I'm currently doing work on to try to get the things organized and cataloged.
Yeah, there is more, you know, Carolyn. So
I can imagine. Let us talk.
I'll let you work on that set first.
Okay. I'll let the librarians know. I did my MA paper on Rhone.
Nice.
Yeah, it was very good. So this title, All Time Realities in Old Storytime, is one of those that came to mind when Patria was speaking, all right? Because it mentions that. And an old story worth seeing is another review by Mervyn of a later production when it was going to the barn, I think that was, which is where I first saw it, my teenage self first saw it. And I chose this one because this was from it going to Canada, and the review is about the end of the run. It was a 4-night run, but if you can see, it's not very clear, but here we have Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Miami, Nassau, Trinidad, right? So that's another feature, I think, of Old Storytime. It has played in many places.
The St. Croix and St. Thomas Sea was key.
I come in up to those pictures. I come in. So these now are, and they're overlapping. I need to go to slideshow for you to see them separately. These are from the 2012 production. There is Dorothy, Patria-Kaye, and no, poor Michael is not in the one in the gathering, in the Son of the Gathering, out front at the start of the play. And then Dorothy and Bello. Ben. There we go, Larry. Your time.
Oh, Larry.
No, this is Austin St. Croix.
Right.
Yeah.
Sarini and Keith Sasso.
Yes, that's Keith Sasso at the back. That's this is when we, because we did so much runs while we were at the Way Out Theatre, we were used to traveling and putting up, we had a double set, and here myself and Jerome Lawrence, we had this habit to keep our energy up to react the play. So that's Jerome playing Parbin and I'm playing Len.
A script which you probably know by heart by then.
Oh, sure.
Yes. And my final shot for this slideshow is Dorothy tells me of not long before Trevor died. I don't have the information again, Dorothy. Could you speak? What was the occasion? Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're hearing you now.
Okay. It was the first and only time that the Dramatic Theatre Committee of the International Theatre Institute, ITI, had held its annual meeting outside of Europe. And Jamaica hosted it that year. And this was Trevor speaking to Professor
Rosalie Hamilton.
Rosalie Hamilton. We had a little gathering, a little meet and greet for the ITI reps at the back of the pantry playhouse with that garden setting that they had at the back of the pantry. And this was Trevor speaking to Professor Rosalie Hamilton.
Here was that.
And this was, oh gosh, what year did we do ITI? I think it was a couple months before Trevor died. I remember that that year. I can't remember the year, whether it was 2008 or 2009.
That's the end of my show.
You know, if I may just tell a snippet of a story. The old story time, the Way Out Theatre Old Story Time, first production in Jamaica, was my introduction to Jamaican theatre as an audience member. And it began in a rehearsal I had just arrived in Jamaica, walked into the Pegasus Hotel, and I don't know how, but I managed to sneak into the way out. Sat in the rehearsal at the back and watched Trevor. My first visit was watching Trevor direct that final scene. Luckily, they were all focused on the stage. And saw me in back, and I sneaked back in several times. I was so taken with what they were doing. Then a young student having just arrived in Jamaica.
Stage manager wasn't doing his job.
I'll share two things as well that came, as we've been having conversation. One funny, one not so much. I'll deal with the not so much first. As you spoke, Larry, around the conditions around backstage and dressing rooms and what that looked like when you did that first staging in Jamaica. I also recall that when we staged, we had no dressing rooms. The theater space in which we operate has no dressing rooms. So all of us just kind of picked a corner, whether, backstage somewhere, and that became your dressing room throughout the show. And it pains my heart as we talk about, how much has changed and how much has not. Theater still doesn't have the kind of space in the Caribbean, certainly not in Jamaica, for us to put on a show like this, and others that were and that are to come. And it's something that we still have to address. We have to address for the
I agree 1,000%.
Of theater. Go ahead.
I agree with you 1,000%.
I was going to say, Patria, it's important to say certainly not in Jamaica. I think
absolutely.
Such things may exist in one or two other islands or territories in the Caribbean, but certainly not in Jamaica.
But on a lighter note, there is a moment that I looked forward to every single night on that stage. And the memory was triggered when Eugene said, "Hold dog," when somebody's dog was barking a while ago.
Larry.
And it got one of the big uproars from young audiences who were glued to their seats in tense moments. And this woman keep talking about hold dog, and I don't have no dog at my yard. And I couldn't take it anymore one day. And when she said hold dog, I said, "Rah!" And I just bark. And it was just thrilling every night.
But that's what Pauline Cowan-Kerr did.
Yes, because I know that. Yeah, I know that. I remember that.
Pauline Cowan enjoyed rushing at the door like a dog.
Yes.
And one night, poor Carl Binger, like he wasn't physically prepared, because Pauline Cowan-Kerr is a big woman. So when she moved towards the door barking like a dog, Carl wasn't prepared with his foot planted to break. So she almost ran right through him. That was fun.
It was fun.
All right, guys. I want to open up the session to the other persons who are here with us. But just before we do that, Carmen, I wanted to ask you about Trinidad, about the performance in Trinidad, and about Rhone in Trinidad as well. Can you share with us, please? I think you're muted, Camilla.
Yeah. The network of the theaters in the Caribbean made it very possible for Trevor to reach out. It's very interesting that when I left the university years before, one of Trevor's plays was done in Trinidad because I had met him in Jamaica. I'm trying to remember the name of the play now. One of his very first ones. So he still had connections to the Trinidad theater scene. In fact, I saw my sister there, Stephanie King. I saw her there, and she also was one who would laud and share his work when any new thing came out. So it was very, very, it's not difficult for him to reach to an audience in the Caribbean up the Caribbean islands as well. I know St. Lucia was also another place that he went to, Barbados from time to time. It wasn't difficult to validate that this was not just a Jamaican experience he was talking about. He was talking about a human experience that even transcended the Caribbean. And eventually the plays reached out and went into Canada, was another one of his strongholds. He had people up there as well. Miami, I remember coming to Florida with the play. I even think it was Old Story Time, as a matter of fact. And other people might remember other things. But the question that I wanted to leave with you and possibly ask for a graduate student to explore down the road. It's an old story told by a Jamaican, in the language that only the Jamaican really gets into the nuances of and can find funny. And the experiences of that story, have you thought of, and this is what I wanted the student to think of, where that story came from? Stories don't just pop up just like that. There's to be a beginning. And how much of that story related to Trevor's personal experience? That's the only thing I would leave there.
May I approach an answer? It's not a full answer. It's not a full answer. It's more something of in a way, about my experience with Trevor, because I taught the play a couple of times, and he was, generous enough to come and talk with my students. And I noted, but I didn't write it down. No, I kind of regret that. I noted how his account of the relationship between the play and his life changed over the years, right? And we got more and more. As the years passed, I heard more and more that it really related to his own life.
Yes, yeah, that's all I'll say. That's part of the 9-month gestation period. So,
but can anyone speak
to open up and how much not to?
Right. Can anyone speak to the relationship between Old Story Time and the Gazette? Because going through the papers, when I looked, I found some typewritten things, and I thought, oh, this is Old Story Time, but then it had a son in it.
Remember I said to you that there were a number of iterations?
I'm now looking at a review by Mervyn about the Gazette and realized, oh, that script is actually the Gazette.
Yeah, that is a reiteration.
So, yeah.
And exploration and opening up and actually becoming truer to self by not hiding certain things. Yeah. It's a fascinating, could be a very fascinating study, if you want to do it. Get somebody and done it.
Yeah.
What do you mean by the Gazette? Sorry.
That's what I say. It needs to be done while those who know it are alive. Yes. Go ahead, Travis.
Yeah, what do you mean by the Gazette? Sorry, that cultural specific or...
Go ahead, okay.
The Gazette is like probably the first iteration of Old Story Time, if I might say it like that. The context and the concept put down in a way that was bare bones rather than true to self and the expression that eventually came out in Old Story Time. He went back to the Gazette and explored it, expanded on it, opened up in what he wanted to share about the life through Old Story Time. That's what happened. So anybody studying the two side by side and seeing some of the other writings that may have happened in between would understand that in fact one came out of the other. I don't know how many people remember the Gazette.
I don't.
What year was it?
Oh, that would have been
is it 69 or 70?
70 something.
70, it would be 70 a little bit, I think, in terms of where it is in Mervyn's collection of reviews.
Right, would have been 70
70
something.
little bit.
Early 70s or that.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a million. Yeah. All right, I see we have Henry Mutu here. Henry, are you with us? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Great, yeah, thanks. Welcome here. Thanks for joining in. You and I had some conversations. I remember you were speaking to the Bahamian performance. Is there something you wanted to share with us about the Bahamian performance? Are you're muted, Henry? Henry, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I don't really have anything to share in terms of the Bahamian performance, but I think that what people have missed out, and I saw it in the records, although I was trying to chase down written, but I was trying to chase down any reviews or so on. But Trevor brought the play with Charles Hyatt to the Cayman Island, and it was performed here at the Hartwell Theatre. And it would have been when I had just left sometime. I had been here for 2 years. So it could have been that here before that. I came when I left the School of Drama for the first time. I came to Cayman around sometime close to the end of 83. And it would have been here before. But I know that it was done because I saw in the records a mention of it. A little
we came to Cayman.
Yeah, right. And I'm surprised that you guys didn't mention it because Cayman is right next to Jamaica. So it probably was on a eventful tour. But it was brought by the person who ran the Cayman National Theatre Company here, Jeffrey Creswell. He's no longer here. But I wanted to, it's strange because in my association, not with the play as such in terms of things that Eugene I've never directed it, although I have long wanted to direct it. It's a fabulous work. But as Eugene said, the play was his introduction to Jamaican theater, as it was mine. Because I arrived in Jamaica around December 1979 just to pick up my position at the School of Drama from January 1980. And the first Jamaican production I saw at the Way Out Theatre was Old Story Time. And I had seen lots of good productions around the region. You know, I used to tour in the days when I could act. But when I saw Old Story Time, although I had seen very, very good productions. Remember, I had seen Rhone before. I had seen Rhone Smile Orange in Guyana for Carrie Festa 1972. It was done at the Little Theatre. Not the Little Theatre. It was done at the Theatre Guild of Guyana. And I don't know if you were there, but I think Eugene would have known that, and maybe Mervyn. I don't know. Mervyn, did you tour with the Carrie Festa?
No, I didn't make it.
Anyway, so I saw him, and I had also heard that about Trevor. I had read some of the plays earlier, but then I had heard about him a little more about Trevor from Ken Corsby, who is still is my good friend, who is in his 90s now. And he had told me, and again, it wasn't mentioned, but it might be useful for people to know that Trevor, when he went to Rose Bruford, Trevor graduated, he won the prize for acting. Not directing, not writing, but for acting. And he was Ken said to me that he was one of the finest actors around. I've never seen him perform, although I've watched him in rehearsals and so on. But All Story Time was a revelation to me. The quality of acting, I had from Leonie, Charlie, and all the other people, and Bobby, and everybody that was here. I don't remember all the people. I remember, is it Pauline Kerr, Bob's wife?
Yes.
She was in it. Calvin, of course, and there are very other people. But the quality of the acting across the board, this is not just one production, and it's testament to Trevor's writing, because the characters in the play, and Eugene talked about storytelling, but the characters are so well balanced that structurally, when you were performing the play, you'd really have to be a bad director to really produce a bad production. You know what I mean? Because the writing is so good, and still today he's my favorite Caribbean playwright in terms of handling language, Caribbean language, Jamaican in particular, obviously.
What do you think of what Carolyn said, though, that about George, that character was not redeemed?
You mean which one was George? Remind me, because I don't.
Mongoose.
The villain,
yeah. George McFarlane.
Oh,
the bank manager.
Yeah, but see, I don't remember a lot of the details of the characters. But here is the thing: I mean, I know that a couple of people mentioned it about the whole thing of the tall hair and so on, and how because of our treatment in the Caribbean and because we're still living these kinds of things with the bleaching and so on, it is difficult sometimes if we see a play like this not to look at the very people who are bleaching among us with a sympathetic eye. I don't mean, in other words, if one thinks about what one has to do to make a living or to earn money, a lot of times it borders on a kind of a prostitution where in order to keep your job and get your job and hold your job, it is not that a lot of times they may not have wanted to do this, so that if I was directing it at any point in time, it probably won't, I don't know. But I would certainly look at that whole thing and find that area of sympathetic understanding of why it is that Miss Aggie and many other Caribbean women of the time. I remember Anna Ford Smith talking about, I think it was her grandmother, and when I was doing oh gosh, what's it mother poem? Not, I don't remember, but I did a poem. But I remember her talking, and this whole thing about wanting to have lighter skin. And even today, you get it. Your skin is a little lighter. You might get an advantage. You may not think so, but somewhere along somebody's line, you'll get that kind of preference. So that's one of the things that I would want to explore more. The real reasons why, not just Miss Aggie, but why our society. I mean, we know. I suppose I know why they do it, but essentially to find a way of, while we blame them or while we say they shouldn't be doing this, we know that we shouldn't be doing this, but then the circumstances that knot us up in a way that we try to do everything to get out of it. And there are people who can be better than weeding a garden, but they take the job because it's the only one they can get. And so people do things. So for me, I would like to find that sympathy. But I just wanted to say again that it was my introduction to Jamaican theater. One, it was impressive. I saw it twice. I didn't have money, in those days, although it wasn't a big fee compared with today, I could make it twice. And I saw it and really, really enjoyed it. And that was my introduction. And it helped me a lot in understanding the kind of quality that one should, should aim for. And of course, after that, having met Trevor and so on, I think we were doing Every Month. He wrote a play called Every Month, and it never happened. I used to design it, and Dennis was to direct it. And I know it came off at the Little Theatre, but I don't think it was very well done, and I don't think he was too pleased with the whole production. But outside of that, I just wanted, and first of all, and I'm really happy to see Mervyn. Mervyn was one of the people after that production, of course, when I started to work as a designer in Jamaica and at the school teaching, who was very generous to me in his reviews of the work that I did. And also people like Larry and Eugene, and even when I did pantomime, all the people there sitting whose work I admired. I just wanted to say thank you for whatever this play and Trevor Rhone has been to me and done to me. I brought him to Jamaica to Cayman to do a talk. I think it's a couple of days, 3 or 4 days, and he met with people and talked to them about play and playwriting and so on and so on. In the early 90s, I think it was, before Bella's Gate Boy and so on. We corresponded a couple of times, but thank you again. And I wish I had more to say about the Bahamian production. I tried to get a lot out of them. But they said all the cast members were now dead, and there was one woman who had associated it with the play, but they couldn't find her. And I was trying to encourage one of them to come on this the podcast here to talk a little bit about what they saw, because Dr. Nicolette Bethel, who some people might know her, she saw it, and she saw it with Philip Burrows. Philip Burrows and Nicolette are the two sort of major theater people. They probably run the only theater company in the Bahamas now, and they do something called Shakespeare in Paradise every October. One Shakespeare play and the rest Caribbean, and sometimes they bring people in. So who knows, and thanks everybody. Sorry, I can't give a lot more information, but just to say how impressed I was by the play and how much it did for me as a director who started to direct. I was directing minor stuff after that, but when I really started to direct was after I saw that in 79.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks for that. Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Did Michael Forrest play George?
Yes, he did.
Oh, great. Yeah. Michael, I'd really like to hear about your experience. Can you share, please? When did you play that character? What production were you in? Was it Eugene's production?
Yes, in 2012.
Yeah, that was the second one. Briefly, I met Trevor Rhone when I was going to high school. He was the drama teacher. Himself and Yvonne Jones. We do drama classes, and from that time I was impacted. He'd bring the newsreels from one of them radio stations, and we practiced to read news. 11 years later, I'm at the drama school. I didn't know much about theater. I just kind of walked off the street and went into drama school. I had no real background in drama, but something attracted me to it. I just went, and I got a job on the production at the Way Out Theater as a gopher. Bill said, "Go for this, be an usher at night." And so I had the opportunity to see Trevor at work, not just as a director, but as a producer, and what he brought to his work, and the level of energy and creativity, and just so much of Trevor that he was a hard taskmaster, I can tell you that. He didn't put up with any foolishness. And he often laughed at me because I couldn't even hold a drill properly. So he would look at the guys in the production and say, "Yeah, drama school, man, this can't build set, Him can't even hold the drill properly." So my initiation in Trevor Rhone started like that, and I was fortunate to, as a usher for the play, to see that play almost every night. Charles Hyatt, Keith Sasso, Leonie Forbes, Carl Binger, Barra, Harriet, and another lady. I can't quite remember who it was that played Lois.
Carol Ruslan, and
yeah,
could be. And that run lasted for a while, and then it led me into two other plays that Trevor was producing. Behind it came Who Can Play, and I worked on that again. And behind that came What the Butler Saw. So the whole story time opened up my experience like that as a gopher, learning beside the big men, watching them work, and understanding what this craft was about. And as he went along, Trevor left some tidbits to me that I'll never forget. One of them was, he'd say to me, "Oh, Michael, if ever you're directing a play and an actress is giving you a problem, fire her, put the costume on yourself, and play the role." I never forgot that. And I'm quite prepared to do it if it should ever happen. And so, yeah, I was able to work again later on Smile Orange. I was having some problems with the play, and I remember Trevor Rhone coming to my home here one night. I was sitting on the veranda, and Trevor came to the gate and said, "Michael, I need to speak to you." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, I realize you're having a problem with that role, O'Keefe in Smile Orange. Do you want to do the play?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you willing to come and work with me?" And I said, "Yes." And for 1 week, Trevor Rhone and I stayed inside of that small theater there, the barn, which didn't have any much ventilation. It was a zinc roof. It was very hot. And Trevor taught me the part. And I learned a lot from him as an actor for 1 week. We'd work from 8 in the morning until lunchtime, and then we take a break for half an hour. We'd come back until 4 o'clock. And I also watched Trevor direct. And I've had the privilege of working with several directors who have impacted my life tremendously. But I realized that Trevor Rhone and Bobby Gissé had a lot in common in terms of their directorial style, because I watched Bobby Gissé's direct General B, and I've never seen a senior man animate like that with so much energy, running from in the audience up to the stage to give practical experiences to the actors. Trevor Rhone was like that. We'll be in the Barn Theatre, he'd step up on the stage and he would do everything. But let me go back to the Way Out Theatre. The Way Out Theatre is probably smaller than the Barn. The stage area. The changing rooms were the bathrooms that the general public was going to use. And Trevor was able to stage that play without much change. I can't remember an actual set change because it was so small. And that's his use of space and the way he staged it. So those things impacted me with Trevor Rhone. And I worked with him on a number of other occasions, and I had long talks with him. Trevor was almost like a mentor to me. He talked to me a lot. He'd come and check me, go and have a beer, that kind of way. And then I always am proud to get the opportunity to work with directors who I admire. And Eugene Williams has always been someone that I admired from drama school. And when the opportunity came up and he invited me to come and work on Old Storytime along with Sidney Reed from Montego Bay, who had a bad reputation as a producer. But that was not my experience. Sidney Reed paid me and treated me like royalty. I did not have that problem. I got a chance to work with Patria-Kaye. I got a chance to work with Dorothy, I think for the second time, because we did some comedy with Pablo Hoylet and Bello and that guy Yetman, who's I think is living elsewhere. The experience of working with these different directors, there's so much to learn. And I thank Trevor Rhone and Old Storytime for the mechanics that it introduced to me and my understanding of staging up and how a director works. And I've played homage to Trevor Rhone in staging extracts from Old Storytime several times for Drama CXC, several times. I've used extracts from the play in literature classes when it's required reading. My wife and myself in Florida have gone to parties and done extracts from Trevor Rhone's play for entertainment. And so I could keep on talking, but thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm really proud to have worked on these productions. I've learned a lot, a whole lot.
Thanks, Michael. What about George? Tell us about playing the character George.
George McFarlane, I was introduced to by Keith Sasser. I saw Keith play it, and I was really impacted by Keith. But when I did it with Eugene would come to me sometime and say, Michael, you're not playing a role, you're doing stand-up comedy. Because George had these kind of lines that you could really do a stand-up comedy act with it all by yourself. So Eugene would come and remind me from time to time that I'm doing too much stand-up comedy. And I thank him for that kind of guidance. And George is the kind of person that people love to hate, and I enjoy every minute of it. The character that I play that they were hating so much. I love George, I like to play George. And I remember Leonie Forbes coming to see the play one night, and I trembled a little bit before the performance went on. I said, wow, here's one of these icons who know the play well. And I performed when it was done, she came back and said to me, you despicable man. I felt proud because obviously she liked the character a lot. So, yeah, man, playing a George McFarlane, because of my growing up experience too. I'm coming from a semi-middle class family with the same black and white situation. And as I grew up a little part of in the 60s in Savannah Lamar, I saw a guy get a job in a bank who was not qualified for the job. At the time, it didn't impact him much, but he looked like George McFarlane. And he got fired. A big job with Barclays, a big job with Barclays. And he got fired after a while. But when I came and I played George McFarlane, I said, oh, so this is what it was really about. George McFarlane didn't even pass one subject in a high school. But because of his connections and his family and his color and his social standing and all, which is, I agree with everybody that said this, it is still very much an issue in Jamaica. The color issue is still very much, the class and society is still very much, even though Jamaica is one of the greatest places in the world to live, I feel so. But it's still very much, and the play remains relevant to today. But I think there are people who are afraid of that play. I remember when we were going to be doing that play with Eugene again, I think that, and I stand corrected, there were some notes that came, we were supposed to do an extract on morning time. And when they asked us which part of the play we were going to do, and we told them about Miss Aggie and anything, the black no good, we were asked to edit that. Do you remember that, Dorothy?
Oh, yes.
Dorothy Cunningham, do you remember that? Yes. They said, no, we can't allow it to come on television and say those lines. And we had to edit or change or did something to it to make it work. And this was 2012. So George McFarlane and I play every day. My daughter was in high school at the time, and they were doing old story time, and she would come home and tell me that I was telling my friends in class that it's my father playing that role, you know. And she would say, every time they read the part that George was doing, they say, Fino tells you your father talking there. So yeah, George, not nice guy, not at all. But whatever he stood for, it epitomized very clearly what the society's lines are about. And I would play George McFarlane every day. I enjoyed the role tremendously.
Booze and all.
Thanks a million.
Booze and all.
Michael, yeah.
Hate and love.
What about the son, Trevor Rhone? Would you like to share anything first or ask any question of the panelists?
Yeah, I love to say a few things. The discussions really remind me a lot of my childhood. I would, as my mom said, go to the theater when I was a kid quite a lot. And I would listen to the stories my father would tell him. And I agree, he was really a fantastic storyteller to this day. I do love telling stories and listening to stories. Really impacted my life quite a lot. And I would even tell to my class that my parents really affected my life a bit. How should I say, my life perspective. And I think my mom taught me my love for science, and my dad gave me my motivation for helping people succeed. And one of the stories I really love, which I often tell, is a story where he would and actually this is something I think I would sitting in the living room overhearing him talking on the phone. I think it was one of these stories, and these stories are always really wonderful to listen to. I remember, and one of these stories, there was a young man that stopped him on the street, maybe older man, and he said, thank you so much for what you've done for me. When I was a high school student, you came to my school and you gave a presentation. And this person was really loving theater, and he wanted to be a thespian. And although when he was in college, his parents said, no, you can't do that. You have to become an engineer. And they said, well, if you try to become a person that wants to be in theater, we're gonna stop supporting you. And so he was faced with getting disowned by his parents or pursuing what he really loved, which is theater. And in the end, my dad had inspired him to pursue his dreams, and he went into acting, or I think directing. I don't remember the details. And years later, although he struggled for many years and trying to make ends meet, he had to support himself to do this. He was really, really so very happy that he did this and then become an engineer. Although I'm a scientist, so I like engineering. But the point is, he was empowered to pursue his dreams, and this really somehow affected me quite a lot. So to this day, whenever I meet someone, I try to somehow give them the power to pursue their dreams. And because I think it's a really beautiful story, and I was grateful for overhearing. So I can go on, but I think I'll stop there. And also, thank you so much, Patria, for inviting me. It's been really like lots of nostalgia, bringing back really wonderful childhood memories. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead. Yes.
that Davy Rhone said about Trevor's helpfulness, because it's something that I don't think he wanted a lot of people to know about. But a young man approached me, was it Eugene? Approached me about a student who could not pay his tuition fee or his exam fees. He didn't have it, parents didn't have it. And I just sent an email to Trevor. And I remember saying, I started by saying, what happens to a dream deferred? And I went to explain what was happening. And by 7 o'clock the next morning, when I turned on my computer, there was a message from Trevor saying, Dorothy, collect a check from me later today, and also call, oh, what was her name again? Gave me the name of somebody else. And said, call her because I've spoken to her and she has a check for you as well. Bam, just like that. And he also arranged for me to talk to 2 other people. So by the end of the day, I was able to send an email to the drama school to say, this amount of money has been covered for this student. Please let him go ahead and do his exam. And he didn't know, he just said, it's between me and just between us and go on. I don't think up to this day that young man knows that Trevor was part of it. But that's how he worked.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for this. This reflection. All right, great. So I would really like if we could have hear some of the voices, some of the persons that I'm seeing who are present here with us. We'd like to hear you. Can you share, perhaps comment on what the presentations, or ask a question, or just basically your own experience if you were involved in old story time in any way, as a teacher or as a theater artist, or researcher. We'd be happy to hear from you. I see some names that are familiar to me. I see Yvonne Weber, Wayne McDonald.
While we are waiting on persons to go back in their memories and tell us the stories, I wanted to add to something that Trevor says, my son, that is, not the adult who has passed on, of course, that he may not even remember. When he was a young man, I mean, a little boy, about 3, 4 years, he was having problems with some aspect of growing up. You know, children have problems. And he communicated this to his dad. I don't know if Trevor remembers, but it ended up with Trevor writing a play for him. Not a long something, just a play. And in that play, I don't know, Trevor, you remember, it was in fact about the boy, it was called The Boy with the Magical Shirt. Was that the name of it, Trevor, David?
That sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar, yes. Yeah. It was about to give him the confidence, because Trevor David was not like his brother who would come out in front of your face. He's very introspective and so on. And it was written especially to get him to understand that he doesn't have to be like everybody wants him to be. He could be who he was, the same theme all the time, and build his confidence so that he could get out there and do what he wanted to do. I was going to look for that. I think it's filed away somewhere. A nice little story about 2 or 3 pages, and still in script. It wasn't typed, because initially Trevor used to do everything by longhand, as they call it, and that was one of them. I just remember that as Trevor David was talking. So who's going to take over? Who's going to talk about it?
Just before the others, that longhand reference, we're gonna need some help, because there's lots of longhand in the collection.
Shout me whenever, okay?
All right, thank you very much. Well, I think we reached the time now where possibly we may need to start wrapping up. But I would really like the presenters to, just come with some closing remarks, so to speak, to use a cliche. And then afterwards, if we do have any questions come up or any comments, I would still take them from the rest of the persons who are present here with us. And of course, my co-host Carolyn.
Yeah,
yes.
Sorry, just before the panelists do wrap, I have a question to everybody, to anybody who knows the play. I was in a course at UE with Noel Vaz, and I was totally in love with Old Story Time. As far as I was concerned, the play could do no wrong. And Mr. Vaz was unhappy with a particular scene in the play. And I thought it made perfect sense. And, I thought I had an explanation for why it was there and why it was played the way it was played, etc. Nice, young arrogance and everything. And I have seen that in various reviews of it, there is not an agreement about this particular scene. So I would be interested in hearing people's comments and reactions. How do you respond to the scene with Len? Larry mentioned it, the scene with Len and the underwear and the trying to carry out the instructions of the Obia woman who turned out to be not the genuine article and so on. The scene that is farcical and played for humor, which Mervyn, you commented on, I think, in one of your reviews, saying that it interfered with our sympathy towards Len. So I would just like to hear some reactions to that scene.
Mm-hmm.
My take on it.
Who?
My take on it.
Yes, please go ahead, Larry. Yeah.
Yeah, is that when Mama says to Len that he's a good doctor, this PhD thing, and he's not seeing eye to eye with his mother, especially because his mother and his wife Lois don't get along. When Pa Ben gives him the instruction on where to go, his PhD status is to be cut down a little bit, because that's not in question, because Len before says he must just talk to his mother. That's what Pa Ben says to him. You don't need to try to correct your mother, because she's set in her ways already. Just go talk to her. And because he refuses to talk to his mother, everything that happens after that becomes this hill that is gonna take him down a notch, including the silliness of him doing this jig in the four corners of the room with the baby powder, and the whole thing of him, with the pant on his head. So I think it's just to take down that PhD thing a notch, for him to find his real humanity, to come back to terms with clear communication, not no foreign tactics to Obia.
So it makes sense for you in the context of the play and the character. What Noel Vaz was saying was that he thought the playwright threw it in there just to pander to the audience and make them laugh.
I agree.
Henry agrees.
You want to say more, Henry, on your agreement?
Yeah. Sorry. Let me just. Yeah. You don't want to question a playwright when he does things, but I would not. If I was directing the play, I would have removed the panty scene if I could get the permission to do it. I mean, I think there are other Obia devices, other potions and so on that could have made him look ridiculous. But I actually agree with Noel that sometimes and I think that at a particular time when this might have been happening, and maybe even later down, and some of the plays that I've seen, is that the playwright just allows himself to cater to an audience. And sometimes when you're doing a play and you want to bring people in the seats, you do that. But Trevor was too clever. He was too good a playwright. And I would have taking that, not the entire scene, but the bit with the panty. I think to me it wasn't necessary, and you just feel that Trevor is so much better. I mean, he's a genius, and I don't think that I would have put it this way. I don't think that I would have like put the scene in or kept the scene in if I could get his permission or somebody who now control the rights to the play. I would ask if I could use another device. I didn't think it was necessary, but that's only me, and I don't want to question these motives.
Dorothy?
I saw it as his way of showing that no matter how high someone reaches in society, we all know that there are people up there in society who are going to these Obia people in a disguise and thing. And that is one of the reasons why women Jamaica, and I know about the nowadays, but old time Jamaican women, not leaving them panty on the line at nights.
Yes.
They make sure they take it up because they know people will come and take it to carry the Obia man. So I think that is what he was trying to show, that Len is now a doctor of whatever. He has a PhD. But what he would have seen and learned in his formative years growing up in the country is still very much a part of him. And so when faced with this dilemma, he reverts back. So going back to grassroots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Carolyn, I think I had discussed this issue with you. When I did the play, that scene also gave me problems. But like Dorothy is saying, I think when Len's back is up against the wall, we get that other side of Len, that in his worldview, that he carries, he also carries that folk sensibility. I know that thing in myself. I too have a certain attitude. My academic self has a certain attitude to our so-called superstitions. But I know that, for instance, when I got home late at night as a youngster, and my mother heard me coming, and she said, "Boy, you're coming by your back?"
Mm-hmm.
And I know I did not. I just feel a certain heaviness in the bottom of my stomach. And so I think that it's part of Len's desperate attempt to protect his wife, and that he would take Pa Ben's advice and go to Mother Rachel. And what I tried therefore to do is to, when I did the scene, to see how best I can create some balance, that he was not playing it as a stand-up comic. He was not playing it for the entertainment. He was genuinely playing it and trying to find a balance for it. It is very difficult because of how the scene is structured. But one wonders, at that time, for instance, I don't think among the genres that there was anything such as a dramedy. Now we have dramedies. And when you think of a folk drama, it is a drama, yes, but humor and comedy, which is part of the folk sensibility, has to be part of it. The challenge, I think, is how the scene is structured, and finding that balance, I found, is critical.
Yeah, I agree. I asked the question also because I couldn't see, if you don't grant, okay, so yes, I can see that the scene could be badly paid for as farce, but if you don't grant some belief in the spiritual, some belief in what Miss Aggie believes in, then how do you accept the ritual at the end of the play? You know, so that it's for me, all of those elements are very closely intertwined in the fabric of the play, and it's necessary. You're going to say something more, Larry?
Yes, it's a setup for the finale.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like a well disguised comic relief, setting you up for all the bits that's gonna come to that final moment when the lights go to black.
Yeah, just quickly, I understand that. I accept the OVO. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with anything that people are saying. The image, what I'm saying is that the image, any selection of another image that he did, whatever he did, rather for me personally than the panty on his head, I think that is catering. I'm not going to excuse that. But that's just me. But I believe in OVO. I know it works. My mother used to work OVO, and I can tell you that. And she's a Portuguese woman, and she used to work OVO. I even know some of the spells now she did. So no, it works.
And I'm afraid of Henry. Why?
No, but she was an African woman. She learned African woman in Guyana. And she employed it many times, and it seems to me that it worked, or maybe it didn't work, and whatever. But I believe in it, and I believe that it is work. I believe it is legitimate to have it in a play and to have the scene where, yes, we understand Miss Aggie through all these things, and the son having to do it and to pull him down a peg. All of that is legitimate and good. But that choice of the panty, although it might have happened, I think it that I wouldn't have. If I was have a conversation with Trevor now, I said, Trevor, that just the image, take it out, find something else. You're better than that. That's all. But that's me.
All right.
Thank you, guys. I really
fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yes. So our panelists now, we're at 15 minutes too. Yeah. So.
Yes. Let's go back to Professor Morris. Any closing remarks just from what you've heard and what you set out to do? Anything that you want to just leave with us?
Not really, but it's fascinating listening to lots of different perspectives. The thing is that I found myself thinking mainly, or remembering, what may be a quite minor event in the play, which is when George McFarlane, having been embarrassed to discover that the boy he had called Toto and so on was a man who was begging for help, said suddenly, it's a lovely line, and how is your mother now?
Yes.
I love it. The other thing was, I think that's been part of the picture, but I wonder whether what answer people would give if they were asked, what is the main concern or what is the main message at the end of Old Story Time? Because it seems to me that it's fundamentally Christian. And that, it's been prepared for right through the script, that love is the answer and we must overcome enmities.
Thank you. Okay. Eugene?
Oh, yeah. Well, I enjoy this conversation. I am glad that I was able to work with Trevor after that initial encounter. as an infiltrator, as it were, in the field. We became, friends, and until I was able to actually direct. And in that production, Bella's Gate Ball, which he's really telling his own story, I was able to learn about, in some sense, some of the origins of old story time, in working with him, and his own evolution first as a student of theater in England, where, uh, where he had a difficult time at the beginning, and how he rose to the top in the end. And apart from his storytelling, I think one of the things I find in his plays is his training as an actor. I think in a lot of ways, Trevor's, you could see that Trevor's plays were written almost like how you see that in Moon and the Rainbow Shawl. That he comes to his characters almost from the perspective of the actor, the performer. And sometimes, not in all story time, but in other pieces, I find that there are moments when I question whether those are actor moments or character moments. What I'm saying is that you could see his work, his training, his origins in theater as an actor and being trained that way. I found him as an actor working with, he had a wonderful humility. I mean, he totally trusted me, and even though he had done the production before with Yvonne Jones Brewster, our work was so, the kind of relationship director actor was so enjoyable for me and for him that he made a hell of a lot of additional discoveries in the character and the character's evolution. And he ended up being very excited about what we found together. So, Trevor, my relationship with him, starting from that beginning, helped me a lot in my own work as a director and as a thinker. And I enjoyed the process, actually, of looking at the aesthetics of storytelling as a traditional cultural form, its dramaturgy, and how that transfers into the aesthetics of performance in old storytelling. I think his playwriting is definitely exemplary in old storytelling.
Almost.
A lot of that work as performer and playwright came really to its excellence in old storytelling.
Thanks, Eugene. Thanks a million. Yes. Dorothy?
What I remember mostly, which I thought was quite funny and quite fun, was the fact that students would come to the theater with their books and read, rather than watching what's happening on stage, they're reading the scripts, reading the lines as we go along. And if somebody did add a little fluff or hesitated or said something slightly different you would hear, "That's not what he's supposed to say. It's not so the line go." And it's almost as if they're trying to correct you and cue you from the audience. And one day, Bello got up and he just walked to the front of the stage and said, "Is all that I make so much noise outside my gate? Aye, little man. When big people talking, keep yourself quiet now." And then he just went right back into it. And it was like, "Are you in my talk, you know? Are you?" So, but it was that attentiveness that got to me. I said, "Yep, they're following it. They follow. Everybody have their script out and thing." And you're saying, like, can you not look at the stage and see what's happening in the meantime and listen? No. The other thing was that it's one of the things that I'm so sorry about though is that plays like this will not get a chance to be mounted unless it's at the drama school, because in the last few years we have lost over 800 theater seats. COVID was the death knell of theater, as we would want it, and even before that, we were crying out, so we need more space, we need more seats, and since COVID, we have lost over 800 seats. So these plays, all of these plays that are Caribbean plays that have such a depth of knowledge and oomph, they can't get mounted. It's not going to be a financial success in any case, but at least they deserve a chance to be mounted because the story is still there. The story is still fresh. It's still relevant to our time, and if not relevant, well, we can ask what has changed. But I think Trevor did a wonderful thing when he wrote this, and I can never thank him enough, thank Eugene enough, thank the cast members for giving me an opportunity to be part of this moment in time. And so
thanks a million, Dorothy.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this meeting as well.
Thank you. Patria?
My sentiments as we close will echo some of Miss Doris. Undoubtedly, Trevor Rhone's was a beautiful mind. And I'm thankful for the body of work that he's left us with. Pieces like Old Story Time moved me at 15 years old. And I picked it up and I read it in preparation again for this conversation. And I was moved again as I was almost a decade ago as a theater, as an actress on the stage. It's a role that stretched me. And I'm thankful to Eugene for the opportunity to play something very different than I have, in my theater career. I hope, I pray that for long it will be on the academic required reading for many students and that it can change them in the way that it changed me. And I hope that one day here in Jamaica, we'll be able to say that we have theaters that are worthy of the magic of Trevor Rhone.
Good vibes.
Amen.
Lauriston?
It would be remiss of me not to mention that Michael London had issues getting on because he wanted to be on. Michael London is one of the main energy bunnies behind the first staging of Old Story Time in the Way Out Theatre as the production manager and the head cook and buckle washer for that piece. And he could better explain this excerpt I'm going to read from the program, which stated that Trevor says as a quote, "It is a comedy with a question sign rather than is it a comedy?" And he left that in the program. Then he goes on to say, well, though it does not get very close to tragedy, a lot of it is very funny and it does end hopefully and joyously. And that's a quote from Trevor in the original program. And Trevor is a unique producer because sometime after Old Story Time, he put me on stage as a schoolboy in the revision of schools out, and he bullied me to stage manage it as well and do lighting and sound as well on it. And that was a straight decision by Trevor. But he was one of these persons who was hell-bent on economics, and he found something in me to do everything. So I would like to end with thanking for Trevor for grounding me in my theater skills.
All right. Thank you, Lauriston.
Thanks.
Now, I want to say to the panelists that you've really done a great service to theater, to academia, because this has been recorded and this will be a document, you know, for researchers, for students, for those interested in studying theater, and in particular, old story time, the way you've dissected, analyzed, and also made contributions based on your own experience with the play is really, really invaluable. It's a really invaluable piece of work. And of course, it's your contribution to the University of the West Indies and to Caribbean society. So I really, really applaud you and thank you for taking the time out, you know, to really prepare and come and contribute and deliver. I want to thank my co-host Carolyn, whose idea it was. Originally I had wanted to do story time, but again, you know, pandemic and after pandemic and trying to get back, you know, to work and so on, there was a kind of a, you know, hiatus and so. But I'm glad that Carolyn called me and told me let's go back and do old story time. And it's great to have had so many people here who were involved in the production. So yes, so I want to give Carolyn the last word, but I really want to thank the family for being there. You know, Trevor's son and his wife for being here and sharing with us. I learned a lot, you know, from listening to everyone. So I'm really, really grateful. Yes, Carolyn.
Thanks, Travis. And I'd like to thank you and the Department of Creative and Festival Arts. Is that it? Do I have it right? DCFA?
Yes, you have it right. Yes.
The Creative and Festival Arts for hosting this and for hosting the series, because it really is quite an invaluable archive that we're building. And I'd just like to say I'm dreaming and hoping that we'll be able to find funding to get a recording. There's a video recording of Old Storytime. Raw footage. I would really love to see that edited and made available for people to see it in the future. So that would be my I was going to mention Michael, but Larry mentioned him. There's a line from Old Storytime that I think captures some of Trevor's wit, and I'm going to give Lois, who is not the most fully drawn character in the play, the exit line when he's worried about her going down to the beach alone because she might get raped. She says, no, not that line. Before that, anyway, she says, I don't remember what his line was. Oh dear, sorry. But her response is, no wonder you don't stimulate me intellectually.
I remember that line. That's
yes.
I thought it was a brilliant line.
Yes.
But thanks everybody, and I'm really looking forward to doing more work on the archive of Rhone.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, guys. Please enjoy the rest of the evening.
Well spelled. Bye, folks.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, walk good. Blessings.
Yes.
Good to be here. Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks. My technician, Roger McCullen, thank you very much. Yes, so